I could never, ever, ever have told you that after 14 years of building this company, it would be gone in 14 days. Kevin is a serial entrepreneur and investor, so he was working on his second startup when we started dating. He did a great job of convincing me that I should come work on a startup with him, and that was Eventbrite.
Did you end up raising any outside capital?
At the end of 2009, we raised our institutional round with Sequoia Capital and Rula Botha, which was defining for us. I mean, that was really when we became a company.
Was there anything about the IPO process that surprised you?
The IPO process at that time would be as long as you allowed it to be at the New York Stock Exchange, and had not found another podium full of women like ours was.
I'm Sammi Cohen, and this is Social Currency, a podcast that unpacks the stories that are shaping business, culture, and the intersection of the two. My guest today not only took on one of the toughest industries out there, but changed it forever. In 2006, Julia Hartz co-founded Eventbrite, a platform that democratizes ticketing for creators and communities everywhere. What started as a scrappy startup became the go-to platform for millions of events, from concerts to comedy shows to pickleball tournaments. And in 2018, Julia took the company public. Nearly 2 decades later, Julia is CEO, and she has seen everything. She's navigated the challenges of being business partners with her husband, steered Eventbrite through the pandemic when live events disappeared overnight, and reimagined what the future of gathering looks like. She's also one of the very few female founders to take a company public, and today she's shaping the entire event industry and the conversation around leadership in a profound way. In this conversation, we go behind the scenes of Julia's early career in TV, the wild early days of Eventbrite, the brutal test of the pandemic, and the big bets she's making on what comes next. This is Julia Hartz, Social Currency. Julia Hartz, welcome to Social Currency.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I actually want to start with your fascinating career well before Eventbrite. So I heard a few things. I heard that you interned on the set of Friends.
Correct.
And you also worked in TV development for MTV during the height of the MTV era.
Yes.
And so before we dive into the details of everything that has gone on at Eventbrite, I would love to learn from you what the media world taught you about storytelling that has stayed with you throughout your career.
It's a great question. I did have the amazing opportunity to be in very close proximity to some of the creative greats. So I interned on the set of Friends when during college, which was basically the lowest person on the totem pole job. I was able to see, a creation at the height of its popularity and how it actually came together every week, and understanding the real grit that went into that. I also had the incredible fortune of starting my career at MTV in the series development department when Jackass came to be, and I was actually interning when they sent their pilot in. So I was able to see the formation of something from the original concept all the way through to something that was well known, and pushing boundaries around the world. And then I also had the unbelievable luck of being in the presence of John Landgraf when he started his tenure at FX and saw The Shield, Rescue Me, Nip Tuck, and others come to life. And I would say that when I look back on that chapter, that era in my life, I think what I learned from being in close proximity to these creative greats is the power of conviction, and the fact that the difference between good and great is truly the conviction of the creator, the founder, the visionary, who can see the importance of what they're doing, whether it be, breaking boundaries and blowing minds with Jackass, to truly creating a whole new way of telling stories at FX. And so I just feel so lucky that I was able to sort of peek through the window and be a very, very small part of these incredible teams and learn from some of the greats in the industry.
I love what you just said around the power of conviction, because I feel like you can take that not only from the storytelling lens, but you can apply that to pretty much anything in business, especially when you have to make these calculated risks and understand, if you're going to take the next step or the next decision. and having the conviction to do that. And we're going to get into a lot of moments of having conviction, especially with Eventbrite. But I love hearing about the TV side. How in the world did you go from TV to tech?
Well, it was a meet cute. So I attended the wedding of my first boss and mentor, Jennifer Levy, who was marrying a man, had gone to college with a guy by the name of Kevin Hartz. So Dan Levy was the groom, and I was one of the readers in the wedding. And I had a great honor of reading Corinthians, except for the fact that I had forgotten to bring it with me. And I didn't know if it was at the podium. This was a very big wedding, and the rehearsal was a little bit raucous. So I was pretty worried that I would get up there and not have my material and just completely make a fool out of myself. And as I was stressing about this in the pew of this church in Santa Barbara, this guy sitting next to me kept like asking me questions. And I'm like, dude, you got to let me focus. And so I told him what was happening, and I went up to the podium. Thankfully, the reading was there. Delivered the reading, came back and sat down, and the guy who had been asking me all these questions said, "You were amazing. I'm so proud of you." And I sort of turned to him like, "Who are you?" And I think about that often when I have to put a quota on the number of questions that Kevin is allowed to ask me in a day. But that insatiable curiosity and that kindness, it was just something I'll never forget. And we were together ever since. So that led me to really be able to experience Silicon Valley and the tech industry from a totally different vantage point, because Kevin is a serial entrepreneur and investor. So he was working on his second startup when we started dating, and Southwest was like our operating platform, our operating system. I would fly up every weekend, or every other weekend. He'd fly down every other weekend. So we did San Francisco to LA, which is not too bad, but our worlds were so different. So I would fly up and we'd go to Kevin was a seed investor in what became PayPal. So we'd go to like a PayPal mafia party at an apartment where they were playing speed chess. And then he would fly down and we'd go to a restaurant opening because, one of my college friends was the, PR person for the restaurant, or we'd go to the MTV Movie Awards or something like that. So we had these very different realities. And over the 2 years that we were dating, those worlds were starting to converge. He showed me the first, before YouTube even was a destination, the first wireframes of YouTube, and then the first video of YouTube. And it was very clear that as media was shifting and the advertising model was starting to see some fractures, tech was starting to build this bridge over to Hollywood. I thought wow, I really want to be on the disrupting side. Velocity is my love language. And so I was watching Kevin work so quickly on these new ideas, and I was watching what was happening. And so eventually we got engaged. The meet cute went hard launch, and I decided to move from the Bay Area. So there was also some other pull that happened, which worked out well. My parents live 4 blocks from us. It all collided. And basically, Kevin pitched me the idea to start a company with him. One thing about serial entrepreneurs is that they truly are missing the chip in their brain that says, this may not work out.
Yep.
So he did a great job of convincing me that I should come work on a startup with him. And that was Eventbrite.
You were engaged at that point, you said, when you started the company. Did anything cross your mind?
So many things. So many things.
Is this the right move to get into business with my new fiance? What was going through your mind at that time?
I am 45 years old. I've been working since I was 15, which is pretty stunning when you think about the breadth of different jobs that I've had. And I was thinking that I needed to be working in the Bay Area. And so I actually got a job offer from a startup cable network. And, yes, I was maybe trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, but I also was thinking I am not going to move to the Bay Area and become that person who gets engaged and isn't working. That's just not on my life plan. I got the offer. It was significantly lower than what I had been making at the time as, a mid-level executive at FX. And I just paused. And I think Kevin really saw the opportunity, the power of the pause, and swooped in to give his best pitch. And the pitch went like this. You could go work on someone else's startup and make far less than you're worth, or we could start something together and we could put all of our money into bootstrapping it and you can make no money. And see, I don't remember the moment where that felt like a good idea. I feel like my memory of that is sort of slightly blocked out. The only memory I have is moving out of this really fancy window office in Fox Plaza in Century City and pushing the next day, literally pushing sawhorses and plywood into a windowless phone closet to start Eventbrite. And the next thing I know, I'm opening a laptop on this plywood desk, literally. And I'm realizing that I love to learn by doing. And I actually didn't love school because I didn't love the passive nature of it. And so that's when the spark it happened for me almost immediately that I wanted to figure out how to do this hands-on. And that's what I was passionate about. And so I just through putting one foot in front of the other, we just figured it out. And yes, we were aware that at the time, which has changed over the last couple of decades, at the time, we didn't really have any great role models. We had one great role model, which was Michael and Sochi Birch. They were, and still are to this day, our dearest friends. And we asked them, how did you build, Birthday Alarm and Bebo together and still have this great marriage? And they just sort of said, they both said at the same time, we just divide and conquer. We never work on the same thing at the same time. So we took that as our golden rule. And we just worked on different parts of the problem at the same time. And then finally, if we did have a disagreement, we had a rule that at the point of disagreeing to where things got tense, we would turn out the lights we were in a conference room. We'd turn out the lights and lay on the ground and hold hands and talk about it. And by the time you're you've turned out the lights and initiated said protocol, you're sort of there's no way you cannot be laughing. Our relationship exists on humor. So that was our in case of emergency plan.
Did you ever use that emergency plan?
All the time. Yeah.
Wow.
Especially when I was pregnant and very angry, most days.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
And note to the listeners, if you ever get into a business with your partner, fiance, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it is, you have this back of the pocket option, which is turn off the lights and
lay down and hold hands. You have to be holding hands. It's a practical tip.
I believe it. Okay. So I want to talk about Eventbrite, but before we move on, there is one specific part of what you said earlier, which is the PayPal mafia. And for anyone who's listening who is unaware of what this is not an actual mafia. I need to clarify that. The PayPal mafia, it's essentially a term that has now been coined for the early employees of PayPal. And I think the context of knowing how your husband was potentially connected, especially as an early investor, to PayPal. So I have to ask, are there any funny memories that you have from going to one of these early PayPal mafia get-togethers?
I think that there has been more stories like the PayPal mafia that have emerged throughout the years. And the through line is an exceptional group of human beings tackling a problem that has not been solved before. And this just lightning in a bottle moment. And for PayPal, it wasn't really that they had this huge outcome. There's a chip on a lot of those members' shoulders that they sold very early to eBay after going public. And, I think that's actually the magic. That's the inflection point, is that they then went on. Why they're referred to as the PayPal mafia is a lot of them went on to create incredible businesses that have changed how we think about the world. And for us, stepping back, before PayPal, you didn't really have a way to send money securely to another individual as a non-business entity. PayPal democratized money transfer, and it democratized e-commerce, and it created this opportunity for many individuals to create businesses and become merchants. And that's what we built Eventbrite on. So I know you're asking for funny stories, but I think it's important to note that it wasn't about a very cool group of people getting together who already had long CVs and personalities. It was a pretty intensely focused, very intellectual, very high energy, very curious group of people getting together. And I think that my funniest story I already referenced, which was I went to a party, like a gathering, and everybody started to sort of migrate over to the corner to this like glass table. And I was used to sort of more of the Hollywood scene. And I'm like, oh, Kevin, be cool. I think people are about to do drugs.
Yeah.
Like, be cool, be cool. Kevin was sort of giggling because he sort of knew that that wasn't why everybody was going over the table. And then they opened this really fancy, wooden box. And we're kind of watching from afar. And it was like a elaborate chess set and like the timer,
Yeah.
And I sort of realized in that moment in the film of my life, that's like the scene where I'm like, oh, you're not in Hollywood anymore. Like this is a totally new frontier. And I think that, a lot of what they've created and the through line, if you look at the web, and I know there's been infographics, there's so much goodness in what was created there. And again, I think this has happened in other instances, but it's really remarkable because it's pretty rare to see that kind of talent density happen all at one time.
Yeah. Yeah. And for the listeners too, I think to put some names, and this is not by any means the full list, but you have Reid Hoffman, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, the list goes on. But these are
Max Levchin, Jeremy Stoppelman. I mean, it's just on and on and on.
It is so remarkable. And so I think for anyone who isn't pretty aware of this group, it's worth a Google deep dive just to check it out, because I think it's just fascinating, even the connections there. So you're in San Francisco. You were watching the contraband that is chess, as you just said.
Yes, speed chess.
And so let's actually describe the landscape, which was the space that you ended up building Eventbrite in, right? So back to 2006, we're going back almost 2 decades. What was the landscape like on sending events, organizing events? What was all of that like?
As an event organizer in 2006, you basically had 2 choices. You could use an RSVP platform that was pretty rudimentary, or you could do a DIY solution, which was maybe you're collecting money at the door for your event, or you're using PayPal. There really wasn't anything meant for community organizers, producers, promoters, hosts to sell tickets to events if you weren't a major event that was using a very sort of expensive, kludgy, older solution. So the way we came at it was Kevin came to this idea originally with his co-founder of his previous company, which is called Zoom, XOOM. And his name is Alan Braverman. They thought of a collection of ideas that they could build on top of the PayPal platform using the API. And one of them was ticketing. But when their other idea, Zoom, which is international money transfer, took off and was funded by Sequoia Capital, they really needed to put everything else on the back burner and not. So it was sort of in maintenance mode. They'd built sort of the first iteration of it. It was not called Eventbrite. It was called Mollyguard. Very long story, not worth us getting into. But if any of your listeners would like to find out, reach out to me. So we were looking at this together, and Kevin's passion is around democratizing industries and helping people do things better, faster, cheaper with the advent of technology. Zoom was around helping immigrants send money back home better, faster, cheaper than the 800-pound gorilla, that was taking exorbitant fees. So when we looked at the ticketing landscape and the event landscape, we saw this opportunity to do the same thing. I came to it from a point of passion around really the energy of gathering. It's something that is truly core to who I am. I love gathering people. I also had an opportunity when I worked at FX to see different, we were researching a documentary series, and we went to different fandom meetups. And I had this moment where it just struck me that strangers passionate about the most obscure things could be in a room, and you could literally see the palpable energy shift and the connections and the indelible memories. So I came to it from that perspective and wondering, what is the future of media and content, and what if the future is experiential? And then Renaud Visage, our third co-founder, really came to it from this idea of turning your passion into profit. Not only is he a brilliant engineer, but he also is an incredible photographer. And he was thinking, what if we could help people teach other people skills and make money for that? So sort of all of our dreams came true through the incarnation and over the years, but we came to it from very different places. And so we set out to bring the world together through live experiences. And our first reference point was to build a product that was as easy to use as Gmail. And to make it self-service, to make it open to any kind of event, and to be as broad and horizontal as possible.
So once you had that idea and you started the very early days, you said that you're in some kind of phone closet.
Yeah, we were. In a warehouse.
Yeah.
This is like, I walked uphill in the snow both ways to school. Yeah, that's my version.
So from those early days, what was the moment, if there was one, maybe it was a slow and steady moment, that you realized that you had a product market fit beyond just, this is a really great idea?
So we were in this crazy collective of this warehouse where, today, I mean, again, I'm going to sound like an old person, but like today there's like incubators and there's this massive industry of YC. Back then, it was just startups finding space, affordable space, and helping each other out. We had this incredible collective of about 12 companies that organically came together in this one warehouse in Potrero Hill. And the landlord was really incredible, effusive, evocative, and very entrepreneurial. We were working on Eventbrite, and we were really serving tech bloggers as our first kind of core market. And that was great because they were very biting with their product feedback. They were hosting events and using, what became Eventbrite originally. So there was product market fit. And they were looking to monetize these meetups. So this is like the early days of TechCrunch. Think Michael Arrington, right?
Wow.
Before Disrupt even became a thing. And this was the perfect sort of core user group to start building a product for. The day that I knew that we'd built something that might become, an idea to a product was when speed dating started to light up. And what I mean by lighting up is one of our early engineers had built a map that showed us where tickets were being sold in real time. And it was almost all around the Bay Area, and tech meetups. And then one day, New York started to light up. And it was speed dating events. Second coming of speed dating, right?
Yeah.
And in the early 2000s. And that's when we knew that there was something there. We bootstrapped the company. So we were incredibly modest. And I like to drop this stat because it's A, true, and B, just to remind, the youngins of what's possible. We spent less than $250,000 in the first 2 years. And by the time we were done spending that money, we had traction and we were profitable.
Yep. That's wild.
So when we raised our first round of funding, which was, by the way, not easy because we decided to go out in 2008, we really already knew where we were going and who we needed to help us get there. But that was really that sort of broadening of the types of events, and geo was just super exciting. And we could see it every day.
To congratulate you on that, I think what you just said around bootstrapping until the point where the company got traction is something that less and less companies do today. And I think that's for a variety of reasons. On one hand, you have all of these amazing programs, the YCs, the incubators that you just spoke about, that do offer these amazing injections of capital very early on for equity. But I think that there's also been this, of course, there's this glamorization of startups, I think. But what is really interesting is the fact that you were able to bootstrap until the point of actually getting traction and showing, okay, we have built revenue. This is a company that can sustain itself. And obviously, we're going to get to where the company is today. It's a public company. But did you end up raising any outside capital once you got to that point of traction?
We did. We raised an angel round with family and friends. That bridged us through the dark days of 2008, 2009.
Yep.
At the end of 2009, we raised our first institutional round with Sequoia Capital and Roelof Botha, which was defining for us. I mean, that was really when we became a company.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But I think, I guess I would say, like, I have a front row seat to what's happening in venture. And I think the capital markets have just completely changed, right? As well as the next generation of founders. I mean, the proliferation of incredible ideas, incredible founders is so exciting. So I don't look at any of this as a negative thing. It's just a totally different ballgame. And obviously, as someone who lived through an era where capital was scarce, I do feel pretty proud that we're here today and that, you know, we really made it through those periods of time where we had to rely on the connection to our customer and building a product that they wanted to use to exist.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty cool. The reality of today is what it is. It's also very exciting. But when people come to dinner, which is often, I find founders in my dining room or my kitchen, I am definitely reminding them of, you know, the good old days.
And when we're talking about Eventbrite, I would love to get behind the scenes a little bit. Is there a story that encapsulates what the first few years of growing the company were like that perhaps hasn't been shared widely before?
There's so many as you ask that question. For me, it's more so a series of snapshots in my memory. Plywood and sawhorse desks, tiny phone closet in this bigger space. Then we referred people to the space, and then we got upgraded to a conference room that was like a fishbowl. And one of the startups that was in the space, or actually one of our earliest employees, was also building a dog bed startup. So we had these dog beds in our office that Kevin would curl up on and take a nap on. So that's like a memory. And then I'm planning our wedding. And so it's like my desk is full of wedding invites that I'm unbelievably calligraphing.
Wow.
This was before Pinterest, like right before Pinterest, but I probably would have been so inspired by them. But that's a memory. And then we have our first employee who takes like the third desk. Renaud was remote. He was in France. So we had this like 24/7 dev schedule, which was awesome. And then I'm pregnant. And then I'm sleeping on the dog beds because I'm tired and I'm angry. You know, I was not the most delightful pregnant person. And I'm giving life advice to the other entrepreneurs in the space who happen to be mostly dudes, you know, and then we're like practicing the walk down the aisle for one of them because they're about to get married. I mean, these are like these magical moments of like life happening in this warehouse as we were all building different companies. How much we relied on each other is incredible. And how much we helped each other was incredible. And it was all very organic. You know, I think like there was a wall of cup of noodles that we lived off of. I mean, it was all very like quaint, but also very special. And doing life alongside building a company is such a fortunate experience. I guess like I'm telling you about these sort of snapshots because today I think for some reason I'm finding more and more that I'm getting questions about how to have a life and a career at the same time and like how to compartmentalize them. And ours was mashed up all together into one. And I realized how fortunate that is, but it was also a lot of hard work and a lot of sacrifice. And it was so magical.
Yeah.
You know, our daughter would be sleeping under the sawhorse desk in her little car seat and then cut to, you know, we have 200 people. I'm having our second baby, and our 4-year-old daughter thinks that 200 Brightlings are her best friends. And she's like, comes in as like, okay, it's tea party time. And then we're going to go to the whiteboard and we're going to draw, you know, animals. And it's like, that is just irreplaceable in terms of how we grew our life and our company. And I just guess I wish that more people understood that what got them to this place in life, success and all the things that they feel really drove them, is going to get them to the next place. And they don't have to wait to do life at the same time as pursuing their dreams.
Yeah, I think that really hits home for me personally, because in my career, I was a big tech person for most of my career. I worked at Amazon, left Amazon to build this podcast and my social platforms and everything. And there are so many big life events that I talk to my friends about, people who are around my age. I'm 33 and thinking about having kids and what that next life stage is like. And I think it's really refreshing to hear from the CEO of a massively successful company that the best way to build a successful company is to not separate out the life moments, but when everything's melded together, that's really when the magic happens. Because I also believe this way, and I know it's a little bit of a hot topic, but some people have the mindset of like balance, right? It's like 7:30 p.m., 8 p.m., whatever time you stop working. And then it's like, okay, now I can live. Now I can go on my walk. Now I can, do everything outside of work. But that's not really how it is, especially in startups or scaling any kind of business. You can't keep things separate.
My hot take on it is that life is a jigsaw puzzle and there's always a piece missing under the couch. And so there quite literally has never been a point in time where I'm like crushing on all fronts.
Yep.
My Asana dashboard is just bright lights and green check marks. What we found personally is that having a child early on, so she was born a year and a half after we started the company, was actually a really great way to drive balance in such an authentic way. We wanted to be there for her and have her be a part of our journey. And so that idea of balance just got folded into our lives and the way that we worked. And as we scaled the company and as I became more and more aware of setting an example for others, there was definitely a period of time where there was like the underground nighttime parent working group where you like went home to have dinner with your kids. And I mean, Kevin and I, once we had a family, we would go home and have dinner with them every night because at a reasonable time, because that's how we both were raised and we knew how important that foundation was. Still do to this day, have dinner together most nights. They don't know that like there's an option to not, so please don't tell them. But then I feel like we'd all meet up back online at like 8:30, 9 o'clock. And then I actually hit a point where I realized that getting back online at night had two detrimental impacts to my team as we were scaling. One was it made them all feel like they needed to get back online. And not everybody had kids. So not everybody was taking this like 6 to 9 p.m. pause. The second thing is I'm garbage at night. Like I make the worst decisions. I'm so cranky. I'm just not great at night. So I just one day stopped. And what happened was I found the next level unlock of productivity. I don't think there is a more productive species than a working parent. I just don't. That's my firm belief. And I really unlocked that for myself. And I think like, sure, I mean, we all work whenever,
Yeah.
But I've become over the years incredibly thoughtful about the signal that casts to others.
Yeah.
And also just when I'm at my best.
Yeah. So when you said that stopping the late night login was actually the unlock for you, why was that exactly? Was that because you then went to sleep at a normal time and then you showed up the next morning really as your best self?
Yes, I made better decisions. I slept on things rather than pushing it through that night. I was way more thoughtful about my decisions. And, I realized somewhere in my 30s that I'm just so much better in the morning. So, now today, fast forward, like I believe that work generally ebbs and flows, and there's, sort of like an orchestra. Like great leaders know when to like create the crescendo and then the diminuendo, or great coaches know when to push their team, then rest them. And I think about myself as like, I know when I need to lock in. And when I'm locked in, more often than not, I'm waking up before my usual wake up time. So maybe I'm waking up at like 5:30 and getting down to my desk by, 6:30, and I'm getting through some really important things. I know that's when I'm firing on all cylinders, but I have never had a time where I'm like, oh, I'm great at 10 p.m. Like I'm rocking that. I'm just not. And so I think like knowing yourself, and not to be cheesy, but like think about yourself as an athlete. Like what would you, if you were looking at yourself from the outside, and what would you generally want to see from this athlete to create longevity of performance as well as like high quality decision making and communication? And so we developed that over the years. And, I think that Kevin and I are very different, but we have some similarities in terms of, obsession with our customers and understanding their needs and being sort of stalkerish and acutely observing them, and our passion around how to build product and experiences. But then we're very different in like Kevin's great late at night. So that worked really well, actually.
Yeah.
So I think like that goes to another thing, which is not to try to do it all alone. Yeah. To really try to find great partnership and a co-founder or a team that really helps balance out your key strengths and your weaknesses.
Yes. And so you and Kevin together build this company. And in 2016, you transitioned to solo CEO. Now I'm jumping ahead quite a bit. We're going ahead from 2008, let's just say, to 2016. So what was going on in the company when you transitioned to solo CEO?
Eventbrite was well-funded by incredible investors. We had some greats behind us, Lee Fixel, Henry Ellenbogen, rule out both. We were on the brink of acquiring our biggest competitor in music. We were still a private company, probably a few hundred people, I would say, mostly Bay Area based. And I had been studying under Kevin as the number 2 at Eventbrite for 10 years. And, Kevin's genius is in starting companies, again, that serial entrepreneur mentality, and finding great founders to help. And usually that meant investing in them. And my clear core competency was operating, building culture, brand, processes, people, developing. It was a perfect moment for us to really do the ultimate divide and conquer, which is Kevin passing the baton to me with the board's blessing, me taking on the CEO role, and him being able to go start new companies and invest in founders and really sort of broaden his horizon beyond operating Eventbrite. So I feel really lucky. I was not ready, for sure. I mean, I obviously had learned a lot and built a skill set. I don't think anyone's ever ready to get the CEO title. I think it's such a heady, like, mental thing that you're just not ever ready. I remember calling him a couple days in and saying, I feel like I was in Candyland as like president of Eventbrite, and being CEO was like Tron. This is like and you made it look so easy. What is going on? But personally, it was really difficult for us to not work together. That was like the biggest personal challenge I would say that we went through as a couple, was figuring out how to operate not as side-by-side co-founders.
Wow.
So sort of the reverse of what you hear.
Yeah. Literally, that is the
codependency at its best. Yeah.
And so you then go out of Candyland to then becoming CEO. And then 2 years later, you take the company public.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask you a question that I'm not sure if you've been asked before, but I'd love to know, in the IPO process, this is something that most founders can only dream of having that moment. Was there anything about the IPO process that surprised you, that no one warned you about, that was just not what you expected?
Well, it's interesting. So we're sitting in a time where IPOs are pretty rare in tech, right? We just had an amazing one with Dylan and Figma, but like literally at the time that we were going public, we actually had to compete for the opening bell day slot. Like, it was that busy. One of the things that I learned pretty quickly that no one told me was that the IPO process at that time would be as long as you allowed it to be. There are so many cooks in the kitchen, and it's like Boyle's Law. It's like the gas that fills up the size of the chamber. It could just go on and on and on. And it's a tremendous amount of energy, time, and money. Well, I knew that I could make a human in 9 months. So I decided, with that reference point, that we would have a no longer than 9-month process to taking Eventbrite public. And I had in my back pocket a pretty awesome deadline, which was Kevin's birthday and Rulof's birthday happened to fall in the 2 days leading up to what eventually became our listing day. And so, like you would say to a general contractor, I have this very important thing that we need to finish this remodeling project by. I decided to say to all the bankers and lawyers and accountants, we have a very important milestone that we need to hit, which is to take Eventbrite public for the celebration of these two individuals' birthdays. And it was awesome. It totally worked. It like focused us, it aligned us. But there were so many things along the way in the last mile of going public that were just hilarious. I mean, not least of which the fact that we ended up, because of this competition for the opening bell thing, like, and us being on the losing end, by the way, I won't mention who won it. They know who they are. But we had to price on a Jewish high holiday, which was like a major no-no. And, you know, my parents are Jewish. Like, I was like, I'm asking my parents to get on a plane to do, you know, like, how are we supposed to do this? And we ended up doing it. Everybody understood, but it was just like those things where you're like trying to get through like a series of obstacles that sort of have nothing to do with your business, but have everything to do with the mechanism of going public. And I'll never forget standing on the podium. We like got to the New York Stock Exchange, got our bell, ringing the bell. And I just felt this sense of immense bittersweet emotion because, you know, our families are on the floor. We have our first cohort of Brightlings on the floor. We have a collection of our original creators who had stuck with us on the floor. There's kids everywhere. And there were two observations that were made. One was they'd look through the archives of every single bell ringing at the New York Stock Exchange and had not found another podium full of women like ours was, which was just 50-50 gender split of our executive team and the company. Second was they'd never had that many kids on the floor of New York Stock Exchange. And it wasn't as if we made it intentionally a kid event. It was just like, bring your family, you know?
Yeah.
And I just thought like, this is so cool, but also it just felt like, how am I standing here in 2018, sort of breaking these different molds? So I felt a little bit bittersweet, but now very proud to be one of the few women founders who have taken their company public and are still running the company as CEO. I don't think that's like something that I ever took for granted.
That is a massive accomplishment. And I think
Thank you.
So much of what you said, it must feel so incredibly validating and just almost this out-of-body experience, because you, not only are you acting CEO, but you took this company from being nothing, scaling it, and then you have this big moment and you see all of the people who have been beside you as you're building it, of course your family, but the people who work for you, who've been there from the very early days. I would imagine that feeling is one of the best feelings.
It's one of the few moments that I actually almost passed out now that I'm thinking about it. There's this very small, very kind of treacherous staircase that goes up behind the podium that goes very, very high up. And then you get out on this podium and it's like this tiny, tiny balcony and you're overlooking this huge floor. And I remember stopping on the way up and actually having to like hold the wall because I felt like I was going to pass out. And one of my best friends, who was the head of comms at Eventbrite at the time, she just held her hand on my back and she was like, "You're going to go up there no matter what and go like get your act together." Was so powerful. And then standing between Kevin and Renaud and really feeling that camaraderie and that partnership was incredible. I'll never forget it, really. It was just surreal and so special. And I'm glad that we did it, you know, that we actually did get to ring the bell.
Yes. And so we just did a little bit of a time hop because we said 2016 was when you took over CEO. 2018 was when the company goes public. And then something else very significant happens 2 years later. Of course, the pandemic of them all, right?
Yes.
2020.
Yes.
So I would imagine, as an outsider looking at a company like Eventbrite, that the pandemic would have been a very challenging chapter. But I'd love to hear from you. Was getting through the pandemic one of the hardest points in growing the business, or was it the hardest point?
Hands down, it was the hardest point. I mean, it's hard to say in words how impactful that was. And we entered 2020 with a very focused strategy and had gone through a big acquisition, had gone through the growing pains of that, had gone through going public and the growing pains of being a newly public company with this, you know, acquired business and everything that was happening. And we'd really focused in the back half of 2019 on the essentials, on what we needed to do to be the strongest platform for all of our customers going into 2020. And thankfully, praise be to my board, we had some individuals who really did have a very clear view on what the pandemic could be. So we had about like a 2-week lead time on it. And I could never, ever, ever have told you with a straight face that after 14 years of building this company, it would be gone in 14 days. And that's exactly what happened. And I'll never forget the day that I woke up in early March with a text from our CFO that said, it's here. And I went and I logged into our Tableau dashboards, and it was like, you could just see the line had changed directions. And I remember in those very early days calling pretty much anyone I could think of and getting their advice. And one very, very wise individual, Bob Mylod, who was the CFO of Booking when 9/11 happened, said to me, buckle up, kid, you're about to see negative revenue days. And I remember getting off the phone with him thinking like, negative revenue days. And then a few days later, it happened. We were processing more refunds for events that were getting canceled than we were booking revenue and ticket sales. And so much so that what I mean by the company was gone in 14 days, we had no Tableau dashboards because the line had gone below zero and was effectively negative. A lot of what happened in those early days was very instinctual. And I would say for me, it felt a lot like a mama bear moment where I remember talking to Roelof and saying, what if this is the end? And him being like, this isn't the end. This is not the end. You need to keep going. And me thinking like, okay, we're going to just keep going. And really like it opened up this clarity through that fog of just chaos. I found focus through clarity. I gathered the team on Zoom. You know, we're all trying to figure out work from home. There's kids everywhere in the background, dogs. I'm saying like, don't apologize for the dogs or the kids. They're going to like, they're going to internalize that, you know? So like we made that a rule, cultural norm, no apologizing. And I just asked the team, I said, you know, given the wisdom you have about this business and knowing what you know, what would you do if you could do it all over again? And we just started brainstorming. And by the end of the day, we had a 1-pager on what we would do if we could do it all over again. And then plot twist, I said, that's what we're going to do. We're going to go build that company. And so that's what we did. And every change we made, as hard as it was, and every decision we made, and every trade-off we made was really designed around supporting creators who we knew were frequent users of the platform, were frequently gathering people, and they would be the ones that would pull the industry out of this really dark time. And we were right.
Now we're in 2025. In-person events are back stronger than ever. I think you probably saw this very clearly, but I think once it became safe for people to, of course, socialize in person, there was almost this hard lean in to in-person because people had missed it so much.
Yes.
And I think now in a world, even looking at the pandemic in the rearview mirror, we're in a world where there is such a yearning for in-person events because we're on our phone all the damn time. And we're now with AI, which I want to ask you about too. But I think that there's so much time spent on technology that the opportunity to spend that time with individuals, with real life humans, is more valued than ever. I would love to actually talk a little bit more about the industry as well, because we've heard a lot about Ticketmaster. Ticketmaster dominates in the large venue space. But when we're looking at a lot of events that are run by creators that are almost this longer tail of more personalized, intimate events that are run outside of the big stadiums, right? How does Eventbrite think about competing in different segments of this event space and landscape?
Well, I think that Eventbrite gives everybody an opportunity to connect with the things that they love to do in real life. And that is unparalleled and completely differentiated. You know, we power over 350,000 creators every year, hosting over 4.5 million events. It's a very different landscape. It's the power of individualism, of independence, of togetherness, of community. So we're offering choice. I'm going to really focus on Gen Z because I think they deserve a lot of credit here. They are driving the movement to screen-life balance. They are driving this movement of getting out and exploring their passions in real life with other people. 95% of Gen Z, so let's just say all of Gen Z, I don't know. I mean, there's the 5% that I need to deep dive into, but 95% of Gen Z says that they want to manifest their passions in real life and explore their identity with others in real life events. I mean, I don't know that you need to get a more clearer signal to understand the appetite and the drive. And I think you're absolutely right. You don't know what you've lost till it's gone. There was a moment where we all lived through this massive contraction, this dystopian reality of having to be apart. And that isolation, even if it was momentary or prolonged, was incredibly impactful. And I think Gen Z is not going back. They're looking forward. And so, some of the things that are emerging that are so exciting to us, and obviously it makes me pinch myself that I get to work, at Eventbrite alongside my community of Brightlings on this, is Gen Z is finding that, niche is the new mainstream. Like really, really honing in on what you love to do and being unabashed about it is the new way that people are exploring their identities. The idea that the experience destroys expectation in that there is no one experience that is exactly the same every single time. Think about it, like an event, even if it's the same format, even if it's the same artist and the same playlist, is different because there's different people creating that palpable energy and that magic together at that event. That will never, ever happen again. I think that currency, not to play in here, but that social currency is just about the most valuable that we have.
100%.
And so when people are thinking about the luxury of their time and their attention and their energy, they want to spend it doing things that really matter to them. And that is what's driving the boom of the live experience economy.
I could not agree more. And I think that soapbox is so important because especially as the leader of Eventbrite, you have all of these incredible tailwinds at your back right now. And I don't think those are going away in the foreseeable future for really as long as I can possibly see. But speaking of Gen Z, so you obviously see all of these niche events, as you call it, or these opportunities for people to gather. Have you seen any quirky subculture-esque events? I know you guys did this epic cheese rave, which sounds incredible, but is there anything else? Have you seen any of these quirky subcultures? Because when I was thinking of questions to ask, I was thinking about what has become really popular over the past few years, right? And I think in the 2010s, there was this rise, and it's still popular, but like EDC music festivals. And then over the past few years, we've seen this massive lean into racket sports, to the pickleballs and, padels. Is there anything that you're seeing that's kind of on your radar that you're like, this is interesting?
All the time.
Okay.
This is I come at it as, yes, it's a soapbox that I readily climb up on, but I'm more so pinching myself of that I get to work on this, right? Like of all the things in all the world that I get to be in the front row watching these amazing creators and communities bring things together. So there is the rise of, and I think this has been happening for a few years, but it's really reaching a fever pitch, which is immersive experiences around passions, right? So, book talk. Mm-hmm. We identified the trend of romantasy, which is sort of like fairy porn. Is the way I would say it. The rise of in-person events around this passion, right, is in the several 100%. The rise of fandom events around things like Taylor Swift is obviously an icon and a huge industry. Her events alone, just fandom events around Taylor Swift, Eras Tour,
now her engagement,
upcoming album release is triple that of Beyonce, Charlie XCX, and Chappell Roan fan events all combined. And that's just to say that the industry of Taylor Swift is alive and well, but in these really focused ways, in these ways that people can get together and share their passion and share, their Easter egg hunting and share their anticipation. We also see things like wellness come into play. So soft clubbing is something that we're seeing that we've coined the term of, but that's where people are not going out to get obliterated drinking alcohol, but actually finding ways to get together to have exceptionally fun and irreverent times. But coffee clubbing or Daybreaker is one of the most iconic, I think, examples of this. Rada Adderall is like the most incredible gatherer. And this is like an early morning rave, that is completely sober, but creates this euphoria. We're seeing people think about how to balance their screen and life and going more toward what we call granny core activities. So mahjong meetups, knitting circles, silent book clubs, where I think I just saw a picture of 100 people in a park reading silently together for an hour. Instead of sitting together and talking about the book that they supposedly read. There's just like so much magic in what people think of. And one of the things that I find really exciting is the notion that old media was about escape and new media is about community and connection and participation. And so when I think about what Eventbrite means, I think about it as it's turning this idea of inspiration into manifestation. If you can dream it up, it is an event. We did the cheese rave. We created that from really, truly looking at what people on Eventbrite love to do and then mashing it up.
That's great.
And so that's just a point of inspiration and a signal that if you are a community organizer or producer, promoter, host, first of all, you're an exceptional human being. You're in sort of like the 2% of humanity that would actually have the chutzpah to do this. But also the ideas are endless. And what we find is that these community organizers come with content that already resonates with their community. And then Eventbrite, the product and the service, enables them to scale it. And that's our business.
I love that. I love what you said around.
It's the best.
Yes, all of it. I get so hyped up hearing about everything and even the trends, like everything from the granny core stuff to the silent book clubs. It's fascinating.
It's amazing. One of my favorite events of all time, and this is harkening back to the mid-2000s, was something called Rental Car Rally, which was like a gumball rally, but with really rundown rental cars that were like on their last legs before they got, basically put in a junkyard. Just the ideas that people come up with to create energy around a gathering, it's endless.
Now we are going to the lightning round. And these are questions
I'm so excited.
Yes, I ask every guest. So first one, and you've shared a few of these in different ways, but can you share a daily or weekly system that you have in place that benefits your career or business?
We started to gather around strategic bets and use this way of social sprinting toward our goals, where we get a group of people together who are not necessarily a certain team, a certain level, a certain geography, who are all solving one problem, and then very tightly curating the agenda, what they're spending their time on, and then looping that to the next problem in the next group. And it's sort of this baton pass. And we've created that as like an operating system at Eventbrite, which I think works really well. A lot of them happen in San Francisco, so I get to be there. But also, we are a gathering company. So really figuring out how to create the highest output gatherings that create connections that really help our customers get their problem solved faster has been really successful at Eventbrite and a great tool for me.
Okay. That sounds like an awesome system. I haven't heard something that is around social or in person. It's usually something that's like digitally or I'm planning. So that's a really special one. So the next question comes from the social currency corner, where I get your input on a trend or story idea that's impacting business and culture. And for this one, this is a more meaty one, but I think this is a perfect question for you. So we have heard of the glass cliff phenomenon. And this is a phenomenon for anyone who hasn't heard of it. This is where women are more likely to be promoted into leadership positions when a company is in crisis. And of course, this usually sets them up for a less likelihood of success because the company's already in a position of crisis. As an experienced founder, leader of Eventbrite for almost 2 decades, why do you think this happens?
Because women are badasses and brave and fearless and we rule. I think that you have to look at the fact that people are opting into this. Nobody's making, people take on these opportunities. I think that there are plenty of people on all the spectrums who step into an opportunity that is chaotic and stressful and high stakes and rise to that challenge. I have not studied this enough to be able to say, oh, definitively it's more women than not. But I do have around me at all times a collection of incredible, fearless women who can see the catalyst in the chaos.
I love that spin on it. Any problem is also an opportunity, right? So having that ability to jump in and see the opportunity where other people would see chaos.
I agree. And I think that the narrative around that is a little bit lost in the fact that there's seriously not one person who solves a big problem.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's about truly the fundamentals of a team and how they're operating and how passionate they are about solving the customer's problem.
Yeah.
And I think that's the stronger through line there. But I think going after a big challenge and taking risks is, a privilege.
Okay, let's end with a listener question. So this one comes from Steven, and he asks, when you think back on the early days of building Eventbrite, what is one thing that you were wrong about in the early days that ended up teaching you a valuable lesson?
I thought that in order to succeed, we would have to verticalize from the get-go, that we would have to only specialize in certain categories of events. And I was dead wrong. We naturally built a product that could solve any event creator's problems. And that opened us up to this abundant market of, as we were just talking about, evergreen events. So if we were just focused on music or just focused on business events or conferences, we would have missed everything that's happening in between that has made Eventbrite unique and special, and that has actually meant truly the difference between good and great. And so I think that's one thing that where I just had this point of view that was just completely wrong. Thankfully, we did not follow my point of view in the early days. And I think that's made all the difference. And so when you think about, people aren't looking for a certain type of event. They're looking, again, to feel something. They're looking to experience something, and they're looking to be with their community.
Because after all, where would Cheese Rave fall into that too?
No idea, right? It'd be in between the EDM and the culinary events, somewhere tucked in there.
But that's actually what you just said. I loved that answer because that really is also at the heart of the magic of Eventbrite, where there's almost this feeling of, whether you want to call it serendipity or a treasure hunt, or feeling like there's a little bit of magic. You never know what kind of event you're going to find there. And the fact that it's not squarely in one of those verticals is, to me, what is the beautiful part of something like Eventbrite.
Well, it's the art of the possible.
Yeah. And I think that's a perfect note to end on. Julia, thank you so much for joining me today. I am going to link Eventbrite and your personal handles in the show notes. And as a challenge, I want anyone who's listening to this episode to go find the weirdest or funniest event happening in your local city on Eventbrite. And please tag me or DM me, because not only will I find that wildly entertaining, but I also want to use those specific events to be featured in the social clips for this episode. So, Julia, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Social Currency. I've been wanting to launch this show for so long. I can't tell you how excited I am to do this and how thrilled I am that you're actually here listening. It means the world to me. If you liked what you heard today, please rate and review the podcast because it massively helps to support the work I do to bring the show to life. And if you want to keep up with the hottest business lore in real time, follow me on Instagram at Sammi Talks and subscribe to my newsletter, Social Currency, which is linked in the show notes. Social Currency is a production of Social Currency Media and Money News Network. The podcast is hosted and executive produced by me, Sammi Cohen. Social Currency is produced by the Money News Network team. See you next time.